It's rare that we look at a story where the public narrative and the actual evidence are so completely divorced from one another.
They really are.
We're looking at a stack of documents today that technically covers a criminal case, the Jeffrey Epstein case.
Yeah.
But if you read through these reports, you realize pretty quickly this isn't really a story about a crime in the traditional sense.
Yeah, not at all.
It's not just a police procedural.
No. If you treat this as a standard true crime story, rich guy does bad things, gets caught, you miss the entire point. You really do. What we have in front of us is, well, it's a map.
A map. I like that.
It's a map of how influence actually works in the 21st century. It's about the machinery that operates beneath the surface of global politics and finance.
That phrase from the main analysis really stuck with me, the geometry of power. Because when you look at the headlines, especially back in 2019, you see a pervert on an island. That's the box the media put him in. But when you look at the sources we have today, the flight logs, the banking compliance reports, the intelligence analysis, the sheer volume of high-level connections, you don't just see a predator, you see a node.
Yes, a central processing unit.
A central processing unit for leverage.
That's the distinction right there. The pervert narrative is convenient because it isolates the evil. It makes it about one bad apple. It allows society to say, well, the monster's gone, we're safe now.
Right, case closed.
But the sources, they suggest Epstein was a functionary. He was a cog in a much larger machine involving global finance, intelligence agencies, and political blackmail. Our mission today is to take apart that machine and see how it was built. We aren't just looking at the crimes, we're looking at the why and the how that allowed them to persist for decades.
And we have quite the blueprint to work with. We're going to be breaking down the 2019 legal documents that finally cracked the shield, the actual architecture of Little St. James, which was essentially a fortress, and this concept of chantocracy.
Chantocracy, blackmail governance. I mean, it's a terrifying concept, but it's essential to understanding why this operation ran for 30 years without interruption.
30 years. It's incredible.
And we'll also be looking at the unholy trinity of intelligence, finance, and politics, and drawing some really uncomfortable historical parallels to things like the P2 Lodge in Italy.
So forget what you saw on the evening news.
Right.
We need to go back to the beginning, and I don't mean 2019. You need to go back to a classroom in Manhattan in the 1970s where the math it doesn't add up.
Not at all.
Because even his origin story feels constructed.
It really does, and that is where the mystery begins. Jeffrey Epstein was born in 1953 in Brooklyn to a middle-class Jewish family. His father worked in park maintenance.
Park maintenance.
Yeah. So there was no silver spoon, no dynasty behind him. He was a bright kid, considered gifted, but his academic path was incredibly unstable.
Right. He goes to Cooper Union, then NYU, drops out, he doesn't have a college degree, and yet, and this is the part that always gets me, he lands a job teaching physics and calculus at the Dalton School.
Dalton.
For those who weren't familiar with the New York private school scene, Dalton is the Ivy League before the Ivy League. It's one of the most elite institutions in Manhattan.
Absolutely. The children of Wall Street legends, politicians, media moguls.
And a college dropout from Brooklyn gets a job teaching them calculus. How does that even happen?
It's an anomaly, a huge one.
Yeah.
But it was the first step in his access to that world. He didn't get the job because of his credentials. I mean, he didn't have them. He got it because he had a certain charisma, a way of ingratiating himself. And it was at Dalton where he reportedly met the father of a student, Ace Greenberg,
who was a senior figure at Bear Stearns.
A legend at Bear Stearns. And that connection catapulted him from a classroom to Wall Street. And again, despite having no degree and no formal financial training, he rose to become a limited partner at Bear Stearns in record time.
Let's pause on that rise for a second. In the 1970s, Wall Street was a closed shop. It was not a meritocracy in that way. You didn't just walk in off the street without a pedigree and become a limited partner.
No way.
That climb usually takes 20 years of grinding. Epstein did it in a blink. It feels like he was being sponsored or fast-tracked.
It absolutely screams sponsorship. In the financial world, when someone bypasses all the standard vetting procedures, all the hoops everyone else has to jump through, it usually means they have a powerful patron pulling them up. Someone vouching for them.
So even from the very beginning, he's operating outside the normal rules.
From day one. But it's what happens after Bear Stearns that really defines him. He leaves under a cloud of controversy, some regulatory infractions, the details are a bit murky, and sets up J. Epstein & Co. in 1982.
But this wasn't a normal hedge fund. If you or I start a fund, We are chasing doctors, lawyers, pension funds, anyone with cash.
You're knocking on every door.
Right, you're handing out business cards to everyone. Epstein. He slammed the door in your face unless you had $1 billion.
He wasn't a fund manager. That was part of the cover. He was a wealth manager for a very specific, very tiny demographic. And really, for a long time, the sources suggest he was a wealth manager for exactly one person, Les Wexner.
The head of the Limited.
Yeah.
Victoria's Secret. The richest man in Ohio. A retail titan.
And the source of everything Epstein had initially. The massive townhouse in Manhattan, that was Wexner's. The plane, the famous Lolita Express. Wexner's. The seed capital for his operations, Wexner's. But the relationship described in these reports goes way beyond client and banker. Epstein held full power of attorney over Wexner's legal and financial affairs.
I want to drill down on that because power of attorney is a dry legal term, but the implications are massive. It's not just, hey, sign this check for me. It means Epstein could sign checks, move assets, buy property, and hire people in Wexner's name, often without Wexner needing to sign off on the specific transaction. He was Wexner, legally speaking, for financial matters.
It's total control. It's the kind of power you give to a spouse or a sibling if you are incapacitated or in a coma.
Right.
You don't give it to a college dropout you met at a dinner party unless there is something else going on. It's just, It's not a normal business arrangement. It gave Epstein immediate access to billions of dollars of liquidity and credit. He didn't need to build a fortune. He was handed the keys to one.
And he used that access to become what the sources call a fixer.
Exactly. He wasn't a traditional banker who sits and watches stock tickers. He wasn't trying to beat the S&P 500. He handled problems.
What kind of problems?
Tax issues, sensitive negotiations, moving assets offshore to avoid scrutiny. He was a financial consultant who operated in the gray areas, the loopholes. And because of his connection to Wexner, he had a golden ticket into high society.
And he used that ticket to build what the sources call a social shield. This is fascinating psychology. He cultivated this image of a man of mystery and a science philanthropist. It was all camouflage.
It was a very deliberate construction.
Yeah.
Very calculated. Before 2019, if you Googled Jeffrey Epstein, you wouldn't find criminal. You'd find photos of him with Stephen Hawking, with Marvin Minsky, with Nobel laureate.
The giants of science.
He donated heavily to Harvard and MIT. He positioned himself as a patron of the sciences, this brilliant self-made man who was curious about the universe.
Which is brilliant in a sinister way. Because if you're hanging out with Stephen Hawking and former presidents, the assumption is this guy must be legit.
Of course.
You don't check the ID of the guy sitting next to a Nobel Prize winner.
Precisely. It's a logic of association. Someone this connected can't possibly be a criminal. He used these high-profile connections, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, Prince Andrew, as a shield. If anyone started asking questions, he could just point to the wall of fame. It made him untouchable.
And it also gave him a pretext, right? A reason to bring young women into his orbit.
That was the other side of it. Come meet this famous scientist, come work for my science foundation. It was the bait. It gave the whole operation a veneer of legitimacy.
But behind that shield, the personality profile described in these reports is dark. We aren't just talking about a criminal. We are talking about a manipulative, narcissistic control freak.
The control aspect is key. It's a thread that runs through everything. He reportedly had cameras everywhere in his properties, bedrooms, hallways, everywhere. He wanted to know everything everyone was doing at all times.
It's pure surveillance.
It's the mindset of an intelligence officer, not a banker. And then there's the obsession with eugenics and transhumanism.
This part is so bizarre, it almost sounds like fiction. He wasn't just interested in science. He was obsessed with improving the human race.
He had this deep fascination with spreading his own DNA. The sources mention his interest in the idea of using his wealth to seed the human race with his own genetics. He wanted to impregnate dozens of women, a sort of twisted breeding program at his ranch in New Mexico.
A Zorro ranch, of all things.
Yeah. And he would hold these conferences, gathering top scientists to discuss evolutionary biology and genetics. It speaks to a level of narcissism that is almost hard to comprehend. He viewed himself as a genetically superior being.
It really is the behavior of a cult leader. And to facilitate all of this, the control, the privacy, the breeding ideas, he needed a headquarters, a place where the laws of the United States felt distant.
And that's where the island comes in.
Enter Little St. James.
The island of sin, as the tabloids call it. But let's look at the geography, because geography is destiny in this kind of operation. It's not just a backdrop.
Okay, let's unpack the island. It's in the U.S. Virgin Islands, right off the coast of St. Thomas.
Correct. He bought it in 1998 for a steal, really about $7.95 million. It's roughly 70 to 78 acres. And the topography is important here. It's not a flat, sandy beach island where you can see everything from the water.
No, it's all hills and cliffs.
Exactly. It's steep, it's hilly, it has cliffs, which makes it hard to see into. It's a natural fortress. It provides natural privacy. You can't just look from a passing boat and see what's happening at the main house or the pool area.
And what he built there wasn't just a house.
No, he built a compound, a massive mansion, additional villas, pools, and those infamous structures. The one that looked like a blue and white striped temple with a gold dome on top.
The temple. What was that even for?
Nobody's really sure. A music room, a gym, something else. But its appearance was deliberately strange and imposing. The whole island became the hub, the center of operations.
It was isolated, but accessible.
Yeah.
That seems to be a key logistical requirement for what he was doing.
That's the strategic brilliance of it. It's only a 15-minute boat ride from Red Hook in St. Thomas. So you can fly into a major airport, Cyril Lee King Airport, on your private jet, take a short car ride to the marina, a short boat ride, and suddenly you are in a completely private jurisdiction controlled entirely by one man.
So you could have a world leader fly in, be on the island an hour later, and no one would really know.
It was the perfect stage. You could bring people in and out efficiently, but once they were there, they were entirely under his control. He controlled the staff, the transport, the communications. If you were on that island, you were in Epstein's world. There was no leaving unless he allowed it.
Just to close the loop on the island, because I know people are curious about what happened to it, it's been sold, right?
Yes. In May 2023, it was sold to an investor named Stephen Deckoff for $60 million. The plan, apparently, is to turn it into a luxury resort.
Talk about a rebranding challenge. Come vacation at the former epicenter of an international trafficking ring. It's hard to imagine.
They are trying to whitewash the history, literally and figuratively. But for the purpose of our deep dive, the island was the physical manifestation of his impunity. It was where the state stopped and Epstein began.
Until it didn't. Let's fast forward to 2019, because Epstein had been caught before, in 2008 in Florida, but that was a joke.
The 2008 Florida case is essential context for 2019. In 2008, he was facing federal charges that could have put him away for life. The FBI had built a massive case against him. Dozens of victims.
It's a slam dunk, by all accounts.
It should have been. Instead, the U.S. attorney at the time, Alexander Acosta, signed off on a sweetheart deal, a non-prosecution agreement.
It was for 13 months.
13 months in a county jail in a private wing with work release that allowed him to leave his cell for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, to go to an office in West Palm Beach.
It was basically hotel living with a curfew.
That's a good way to put it. And crucially, the federal investigation was shut down. The non-prosecution agreement was secret, and it illegally hid the deal from the victims, which is what eventually allowed it to be challenged.
It was a failure of justice on a monumental scale. It signaled to Epstein that he was indeed above the law.
It confirmed it for him.
So what changed from 2019? Why did the shield finally crack?
One person, really. You have to credit Julie K. Brown, a reporter for the Miami Herald.
An amazing journalist.
Phenomenal. In November 2018, she published a series called Perversion of Justice. She did the work the authorities failed to do. She tracked down the victims from 2008, she exposed the secret negotiations, and she shone a spotlight on Alexander Acosta, who by 2018 was the Secretary of Labor in the Trump administration.
So public pressure mounted, it became a national scandal, Acosta had to resign, and it forced the SDNY, the Southern District of New York, to reopen the case.
The SDNY realized that the 2008 deal, while legally binding in Florida, didn't cover crimes committed in New York, and there was a good argument it was invalid anyway because of how the victims were treated, so they started digging. And on July 6, 2019, the hammer finally dropped.
He's flying back from Paris, lands his private jet at Peterborough Airport in New Jersey, and the FBI is waiting on the tarmac.
He was charged with sex trafficking of minors and conspiracy to commit sex trafficking. But the real blow, the moment the world saw the reality, came when federal agents raided his Manhattan mansion on East 71st Street.
That palace of a townhouse.
You know, he always thought he was smarter than everyone else. He thought he was untouchable. But when they opened that safe in his townhouse, his defense just, it crumbled.
Let's list what they found, because this is like something out of a spy novel. This isn't just evidence of a crime, it's tradecraft.
It absolutely is. First, the passport. A fake, expired Austrian passport with his photo but a different name, listing his residence as Saudi Arabia.
Which just screams flight risk. There's no other reason to have that.
Immediately. It proved he had the means and the intent to disappear. It suggests he had contingency plans to vanish into a non-extradition jurisdiction. Then there were loose diamonds and stacks of cash liquid assets ready for a quick exit.
Untraceable wealth.
Exactly. And then the most damning evidence. Hundreds of photos of underage victims stored on CDs and other devices.
And the Black Book.
The contact list, the holy grail of the investigation. It contained numbers for powerful people across the globe. Royalty, presidents, actors, scientists, and physically, in the house, they found the massage room. A room with no door, filled with toys and massage oils. The physical evidence corroborated everything the victims have been saying for years.
So he goes to the bail hearing. And this is a guy who is used to buying his way out of everything. He offers a fortune to stay under house arrest.
A ridiculous amount. He offered to pay for private armed guards to watch him 24/7 in his own mansion. He offered to put up his brother's house as collateral. He basically said, I will build my own private prison. Just let me go home.
He tried to use his wealth to create a separate legal tier for himself.
And Judge Richard Berman said, no.
Denied.
Denied. He ruled him a danger to the community and a severe flight risk. And I think that was the moment reality broke through Epstein's narcissism. He realized he wasn't getting out, the game was over, the connections weren't picking up the phone anymore, the shield was gone.
And then, on August 10th, 2019, he is found dead in his cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center, ruled a suicide.
Yeah.
And while the criminal case against him technically dropped, the investigation shifted to Ghislaine Maxwell,
who was convicted in 2022. But the death of Epstein left a massive void in the search for the truth. He took the secrets of the why and the who to the grave.
Well, let's try to reconstruct that how and why. Because the sources we have go into deep detail about the mechanism he used. Prosecutors called it a pyramid scheme of abuse.
That's a really important structural distinction. This wasn't just him finding victims randomly on the street. He created a self-perpetuating system.
How did that work?
He would pay a victim for a massage, but then he would offer them extra money, significant money for a teenager, hundreds of dollars, to bring in their friends.
That is diabolical, because it makes the victim feel complicit.
Exactly. You brought her here. You're part of this now. It creates guilt, it creates silence, and it turns the victims into recruiters. It ensured a constant supply of new victims without Epstein having to go out and scout them himself. It insulated him from the initial contact. It was a business model.
A business model for abuse. But, and here's where it gets really interesting and really dark, the sources argue that the abuse wasn't the end goal. It was the means to an end. This brings us to the honey trap theory.
This is the crux of the intelligence argument. If you look at the complexity of the operation, the wired bedrooms, the hidden cameras, the safe filled with hard drives, it bears all the hallmarks of an intelligence gathering operation. In the spy world, this is called a honey trap, or kompromat.
Kompromat. That's Russian for compromising material.
Yes, exactly. The theory, supported by the nature of the surveillance found on the properties, is that powerful figures, politicians, scientists, royalty, were lured to the island or the mansion. They were compromised, often with minors, and those acts were filmed.
And once you have that tape,
you own them. Think about the implications. A politician who has been filmed in a compromising act on Epstein's island is no longer serving their constituents. They aren't serving their country. They are serving the holder of that tape.
It changes every decision they make. How they vote on a bill, what policies they push, what government contracts they award.
Precisely. It removes their agency. It's a mechanism for control. And this is why the sources suggest this wasn't just a rich guy's club or a hedonistic playground. It was a tool for geopolitical influence. It was a weapon.
This leads us directly to what the outline calls the unholy trinity: intelligence, finance, and politics. And we can't talk about this without talking about the Maxwell connection. Ghislaine Maxwell wasn't just his girlfriend.
She was far more than that. She was the daughter of Robert Maxwell. And to understand Ghislaine, you have to understand Robert. Robert Maxwell was a British media mogul, a larger-than-life figure, but he was also alleged to be a super spy.
He had links everywhere.
To the Mossad, MI6, and even the KGB. He operated in that shadowy intersection of media and intelligence, a very powerful and very feared man.
And he died under very mysterious circumstances, too, falling off his yacht, the Lady Ghislaine, in 1991.
Indeed. The theory presented in our sources is that after Robert Maxwell died, Ghislaine and Jeffrey essentially inherited or took over parts of his network. They continued the family business, and the business was acquiring leverage over powerful people.
It makes sense of why a socialite like Ghislaine from a very prominent family would be with a guy like Epstein. It wasn't just romance, it was a partnership.
It was an operational partnership. She provided the social access, the little black book, and the recruitment of girls. He provided the money, the logistics, and the infrastructure. They were a team.
There's that famous quote from the 2008 prosecutor, Alexander Acosta. When he was being vetted for the Trump cabinet, he reportedly explained the light sentence for Epstein by saying, and I'm quoting here, "I was told he belongs to intelligence, leave it alone."
That quote is the smoking gun for many researchers. It suggests that Epstein was a protected asset, and it explains why he operated with such impunity for so long.
Who would he have belonged to?
It's the big question. Was he working for the CIA, Mossad, some other foreign intelligence service, or maybe a combination of agencies as a freelance asset? Whatever the case, the protection was evident. You don't get a non-prosecution agreement like that unless someone very high up steps in and says, stand down.
And the sources also touch on scientific espionage. We mentioned his obsession with scientists earlier. Was that part of the intel gathering too?
It's very likely. By funding scientists and hosting these conferences, he gained access to cutting-edge research. Think about it. In a world where genetic engineering and AI are the new frontiers of warfare and economics, having inside access to that research is incredibly valuable. He was gathering intellectual property alongside the blackmail.
Wow. We also have to talk about the money. You don't run an operation like this with pocket change. And you certainly don't move billions of dollars around the globe without the banks noticing.
This is the white-collar infrastructure that makes it all possible. The sources highlight that major banks like JP Morgan and Deutsche Bank paid massive fines related to their relationship with Epstein. JP Morgan settled for $290 million with victims. Deutsche Bank paid $150 million.
So they knew.
The internal communications that have come out suggest they saw the red flags. They saw the suspicious cash withdrawals. Massive amounts of cash being taken out regularly. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. They saw payments to young women with Russian names, but the fees were too good and the connections were too powerful.
This is a failure of know your customer or KYC regulations.
It's a deliberate failure. Money laundering requires a system. You need a legitimate front to wash the money generated by black markets or illicit flows. And the global financial system, unfortunately, often looks the other way if the client is big enough. They filed suspicious activity reports, SARS, but then they just kept doing business with him for years.
Which brings us to that term again, chantocracy.
Chantocracy, a system of governance driven by blackmail. When you look at the list, the documents from the Jeffrey Maxwell case, and you see the breadth of the net, from former presidents like Clinton to prime ministers like Ehud Barak to CEOs and royalty like Prince Andrew, you have to ask, how many decisions made on the global stage in the last 20 years were influenced by what happened on that island?
It's terrifying to think about. It implies that democracy is in some cases a charade, that the real decisions are being made in a dark room by someone holding a DVD or a hard drive.
That is the core argument of the sources, that the democratic process is bypassed by this shadow mechanism of leverage. If you control the leaders through blackmail, you control the country, regardless of who wins the election.
So we have the arrest, the death, the conviction of Maxwell. Is it over? The sources mention a concept called a limited hangout. What is that?
It's another spy term. A limited hangout happens when a secret can no longer be kept completely hidden. The story is going to break one way or another. So the intelligence agencies or the powers that be admit to part of the story. They sacrifice a few people to satisfy the public's demand for blood.
So they give us Epstein, they give us Maxwell. Maybe they publicly shame Prince Andrew into retirement.
Exactly. They throw a few bodies overboard to save the ship. By focusing all the attention on the monster Epstein and his Madame Ghislaine, they protect the core system, the banks that facilitated it, the intelligence agencies that may have used it, and the other powerful figures who participated. They frame it as a lone wolf or rogue couple story to prevent the investigation from going upstream.
So we shouldn't expect mass arrests of the global elite.
It's highly unlikely. The system protects itself. If you start arresting everyone in that black book, you destabilize the entire political and financial order of the West. It's too big to fail, but applied to a criminal conspiracy.
There's a historical parallel here that the sources bring up, and I think this is crucial for understanding that this isn't new. The P2 Lodge.
Propaganda do, or P2. This was a massive scandal in Italy in the 1980s. It was a secret Masonic lodge that was found to be essentially a shadow government. It included the heads of all three Italian intelligence services, military generals, top politicians, media tycoons, even a future prime minister, Silvio Berlusconi, was a member.
And what were they doing?
They were manipulating the Italian state, coordinating with the mafia, and were linked to the Vatican Bank and Operation Gladio, the NATO stay-behind armies. It was a conspiracy of the elite to bypass democracy and fight communism, using any means necessary, including terrorism and blackmail.
So the point is, Epstein isn't a unicorn.
Exactly. He isn't a unique evil. He is just the latest, maybe most lurid iteration of a standard operating procedure for the deep state. These structures, uniting spies, criminals, and politicians for mutual benefit and control, have existed before, and they will exist again.
That is sobering. It places Epstein in a lineage of corruption, rather than just being an outlier. And looking at the geopolitical fallout, the sources argue that this has cost the West heavily.
Tremendously. The US and the UK love to lecture the world on human rights, on the rule of law, on transparency. But when your own former presidents and princes are implicated in a child trafficking ring run by an intelligence asset, you lose the moral high ground.
It becomes propaganda for rival nations.
Absolutely. Russia and China can point to this and say, look at their corruption, look at their hypocrisy. This is who you're taking lessons from. And then there is the massive issue of the missing archives.
The tapes, the hard drives that weren't in the safe.
Where are they? The FBI raid found photos, but the massive library of video surveillance that must have existed given the wiring of the house, it has never been made public. Where did it go?
The sources speculate on where they could be.
There are two main possibilities, neither of them good. One, the friendly intelligence agencies, say the CIA or Mossad, secured them first. In that case, the control just continues. The blackmail just changed hands. The politicians are still compromised, just by a different master.
And the second possibility.
The scary scenario is if a rival power, say Russia or China, hacked those servers or got access to that material through an asset.
Then it becomes a geopolitical weapon. Do what we want, or we release the video of your senator on this island.
Exactly. It's a nuclear weapon of influence. If a foreign adversary holds that compromat, they can destabilize Western democracies at will. It's an existential threat.
Looking to the future, the sources suggest that the Epstein model is evolving. We won't see another island, will we?
Probably not. Islands are too physical. They're too 20th century. They leave a paper trail of flight logs and property records. The evolution of this threat is digital.
So what does that look like?
The new Epsteins will likely operate on the dark web. They will use cryptocurrency to move money anonymously. They'll use encrypted messaging apps. The blackmail will be cyber blackmail, using hacked webcams or phishing schemes.
And they'll still use the same kind of cover.
Yes, and even more effectively, they will use fake philanthropy. Using NGOs and charities as fronts for trafficking and money laundering, Epstein showed them the blueprint. Wrap yourself in a noble cause like science or saving the world or climate change, and no one looks under the hood. It's the perfect cover.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, what are we left with? It's a pretty bleak picture.
We're left with the realization that the Epstein saga isn't a glitch in the system. The sources suggest it is the system, or at least a feature of how power operates at the highest level.
It's a feature, not a bug.
It's a feature, not a bug, and it reveals a crisis of trust. We are moving into an era of deep, corrosive cynicism. The public now realizes, I think, on a gut level, that justice applies differently to the elite than it does to you or me. There's a two-tiered system.
One for the people in the black book and one for everyone else.
That's it. And that realization breaks the social contract. It shatters it.
How so?
When people believe the game is rigged, they stop playing by the rules. It fuels populism on the left and the right, it fuels unrest, and it fuels a total lack of faith in our core institutions. The justice system, the media, the government. It's incredibly dangerous for a democracy.
This has been a heavy, deep dive, but a necessary one. We've looked at the man, the island, the arrest, and the terrifying machinery behind it all.
It's a story that forces us to question the nature of power itself and who really wields it.
I want to leave you with a final thought, something to mull over as you go about your day. The manager, Jeffrey Epstein, is gone. He's been removed from the board. But the corporation, that underground economy of blackmail, influence, and intelligence, is still very much in business. The demand for leverage hasn't gone away. So the question isn't just who was on the list. The real question is, who is running the new version of this operation right now, perhaps in a server room somewhere, rather than on a tropical island?
That is the question we should all be asking.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.